This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of Intuitive Eating. I am Diana Chislett. I'm a registered dietitian that works with Attune Nutrition, and I used to work for THIRA, and I'm currently consulting for THIRA. So I'm glad to be here today. This is the part 2 of Intuitive Eating. Part 1 has been recorded. It was recorded 2 weeks ago and is available on the website. And this recording will also be available on the website. So for anyone who is attending and wants to participate, please know that you will be part of that recording. And I certainly encourage you to participate since these talks are for you and to best benefit you. So I invite you to ask questions, be curious, interrupt. We can start a discussion. If we want to get personal, that's great. If we want to keep it higher level, that's also great. Again, this is for you. I encourage you to ask what's on your mind, to learn about this information, and hopefully think about it and how it could apply to your life. I appear every other week. Ann Holler is the therapist who does the mental health sound bites on those weeks when I am not appearing. And so you can get a little bit of nutrition, a little bit of mental health, and like I said, figure out how it applies to your own life. So welcome, thank you for being here. All right, next slide, please. So 2 weeks ago, I talked about Intuitive Eating, part 1. Like I said, it's recorded and available for viewing. I did want to just back up a little bit and restate a couple of things as we move into part 2 and talk about what the 10 principles of intuitive eating are. So last week I mentioned that there are 10 principles. It's a program that was developed in the mid-90s, so it's been around a long time. I really encourage you to be curious about intuitive eating. It's a concept I feel like we hear about, but we don't always know what it actually means. It's up to you whether you want to try to incorporate a little bit of intuitive eating to your life or just go, full on in. But the idea of being curious and the idea of exploring what it means to you, if the concept makes sense, if it's something that you want to try, that's all up to you. So curiosity. Noticing hunger and fullness cues. That's another concept that we'll go over a little bit more today. But that's really what intuitive eating is noticing your hunger and fullness and then eating to that hunger and fullness. It makes you think about your relationship with your body, makes you think about whether you're really mean to your body, kind to your body, somewhere in between, and helps redevelop your relationship with your body. It also is all about rejecting the diet mentality. So that's a diet mentality that is super prevalent in our culture. We get a ton of information spewed at us all the time about how our bodies aren't good enough, how we need to be thin, how we need to lose weight. And that creates a lot of pressure, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. So intuitive eating is a way of looking at your own relationship with food and redefining it and deciding whether you want to live in a world of shame and guilt, or do you want to start being a little bit kind to yourself? And of course, that's the last message on this slide, is just like when you're learning a new language or a new instrument or anything new, you want to be kind to yourself. You want to let the process happen. Some days are going to be good. Some days are going to be hard. Some days you may feel like you've mastered this instrument, no problem. Other days you're thinking, holy smokes, I think I have to go back to basics and start again. So just like in anything, be kind to yourself, be forgiving, be curious, and we'll get started. So next slide, please. So we're going to go through the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And these are available on the intuitive eating website, or if you Google intuitive eating. Obviously, like I said, this presentation is recorded and the slides will be available, so you can also review the principles, because 10 is a lot to memorize and I don't want you to have to do that. But we're going to review what these 10 are today. And like I said, please interrupt if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, and if you want to start a discussion, I'd love to. So first off, reject the diet mentality. So if you're one of those people that has magazines, little advertisements, gets bombarded on Facebook or Instagram, any other social media with hormonal resets, exercise programs, the magic pill that's going to solve all your problems because, you know, it guarantees weight loss in a short amount of time, or else you fail. Think about getting rid of all that stuff. Think about blocking the ads. Think about getting rid of all the little pamphlets that get sent to the house, especially around New Year's, advertising all the gyms and advertising all the weight that you need to lose to be a better person. Basically, stop listening to the lies that we are fed by the diet industry. And the diet industry is making so much money off of our own vulnerabilities about our bodies and our own thoughts and beliefs that our bodies aren't good enough the way they are. So the diet industry gets richer, and the feelings of failure on our part increase as well, because when we try to diet, or we try to change our lifestyle, or we try to lose weight, and if we don't lose as much as we are supposed to, or told to, or if we lose weight and then regain it, that is generally resulting in feelings of failure. And nobody wants to feel like a failure, right? And nobody wants to spend a ton of money only to find that now they're being called a failure and they are looking at the new diet to start to try and be more successful. So intuitive eating is about rejecting that diet mentality. Just try as hard as you can, throw everything out. And it's hard when you have the thoughts and you have those ingrained concepts of why we need to lose weight, the ideal of thinness, etc. So those are sometimes hard to get out of your mind, but as you work on the process, then you can start to acknowledge, yes, I'm having these thoughts, but they don't define my reality. So the second principle of intuitive eating is to honor your hunger. It's totally okay to eat. We're living beings, just like all living beings on this earth, and everything eats, right? Everything. There's no living being that does not eat. So it's okay for us to eat. Eating does not make us fat. Eating foods that are deemed junk food or bad foods do not make us fat. We are meant to eat. We should be eating. Our bodies need food. We need protein. We need fats. We need carbohydrates to survive. I'm pretty sure everyone has felt that concept of hunger when you don't eat and you're starving yourself and you're not honoring your hunger. And what happens then is you start to lose all sense of cognitive function. You may feel more confused. Thoughts generally get a lot more negative. You may find that you're a lot more irritable. This is called hunger. And I don't know if anybody ever saw these Snickers bars. I don't know if they're still using these little words, but I thought they were fantastic. And they basically tell you in a word what happens when you become hangry. So nobody wants to be cranky, confused, grouchy, or ornery. They also had some positive messages as well, but those don't relate to hunger. Those relate to when you do eat. So we'll save those for another presentation. Are there any questions at this point? All right. Next slide, please. So the third principle of intuitive eating is making peace with food. So giving yourself permission to eat, period. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. I feel hungry. I need food. I'm going to eat. Sometimes I'm going to eat even when I'm not hungry, and that's okay too, because we eat for all sorts of different reasons. What happens if we don't eat, or if we don't allow ourselves to eat foods that we actually want to eat, is we deprive ourselves. That can lead to cravings. That can lead to us feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to throw in the towel. I'm going to eat my cravings, that feeling of overeating, and then that feeling of guilt. So that's a cycle that so many people fall into. If we just ate what we wanted in the first place, we would most likely do it in a way that we're eating an amount that we're comfortable with. And so we don't end up with the guilt and shame that comes with eating that food. Hunger is biological, just like I had just said in the last slide. It has nothing to do with willpower. It has nothing to do with strength. You're not a bad person if you eat, right? You're actually a really sensible person who is honoring your body and recognizing that food is part of life, right? And we eat for all different reasons, and those reasons don't have to be bad, but instead can be about enjoyment of food, taste, culture, travel, traditions, right? So it's making peace with your food, redefining what that means, what food means to you. Challenge the food police is the fourth principle. The food police are what live inside of our minds and dictate all of our food rules. They tell us when we are breaking a food rule, just like if we're breaking the law, or if we are abiding by a food rule, and we get a big old check mark for that. So a food rule might be, I can't eat cookies unless I go and exercise and make sure that I burned off all those calories. Or I did eat cookies, so that means that I can't eat any sugar tomorrow or the next day or the next day. The food police really need to be just shipped on out of your brain, shipped on out of your consciousness, and just say no. We don't need them, right? We should be policing and following our own rules, not listening to that negativity that lives in our brain. All right, next slide, please. Fifth principle is discover the satisfaction of food. So I think we've all been in a situation where we have sat down to a really delicious meal. Maybe we're sitting with great people that we really care about. The environment might be really fantastic. It might be a beautiful setting. And the whole thing is just a really positive experience. There's no reason that we can not do that all the time, right? So it may mean that you clear off your kitchen or your dining room table. It may mean that you sit down with your family or friends. It may mean that you put some flowers on the table or set the table, or it could just be totally bare. But the idea is to make your environment really pleasant, enjoy the food that you're eating, and you're much more likely to be content and sated with that amount of food, right? When you're being mindful and you're being joyful and you're not being critical of yourself, it's much easier to determine, am I feeling content from this food? Do I need to eat more, or should I stop now? And that is such a simple thing that we can do, although we make it a lot more complex for ourselves, right? Because a lot of times we're eating on the run, we're grabbing and going, we're rushing off to drive kids somewhere, but sometimes slowing down and figuring out, was that enough food for me? Do I feel satisfied? And if the answer is yes, then super, you've just honored your body. Number 6 is feeling your fullness. So checking in with your hunger. So similar to number 5, figuring out when you've had enough. So I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. What's my fullness like? Am I full? Am I overly full? Do I feel like I could still eat a little bit more? Now, sometimes it's not just the feeling of I have enough food in my belly. Other times, you may be hungry or full based on emotion, anxiety, stress, etc. But for all intents and purposes right now, did I eat adequate amounts of food to fill up my body? And am I feeling at a place where I can stop eating? Some people don't eat enough. That's a major problem. So they may find I'm still hungry, or I'm hungry an hour later. That's okay. As your body is regulating and getting used to this new normal of intuitive eating, you are experimenting, being curious, and may find that you're eating a little bit more often. That's totally okay. And remembering, eating food more frequently, eating breakfast when it's not something you normally would do, those things don't make you gain weight, they don't make you fat, right? That's the food police, and that's you not trusting and honoring your body. So listening to your body, being mindful, listening to the signals, you may find that you actually feel physical grumblings in your stomach, thinking, I'm hungry. You may find that your pants feel a little bit tighter after you've eaten, thinking, okay, maybe I'm a little bit full. And I know this feeling is going to go away, but right now, maybe it's a sign that I can stop eating. So figuring out all the different signals that your body gives and starting to listen and trust those signals. Next slide, please. So number 7, coping with your emotions with kindness. We preach kindness, we practice kindness, be kind. And I love the concept, right? But sometimes we forget to do it to ourselves. Sometimes we are kind to everything else in our lives, but we're not kind to ourselves. And so when we let that diet industry and that diet mentality get into our heads and tell us we're not good enough, then often we treat ourselves really poorly. We're really mean to ourselves. We say things to ourselves that we would never say to our worst enemy. So acknowledging that, yeah, we have emotions. We have emotions related to all different things in our lives. Sometimes when stress is high, emotions are much more intense. Sometimes when we're feeling relaxed, our emotions are much less intense. So food doesn't fix emotions, right? It may be that we eat when we're feeling sad or lonely, or we want some comfort, and that's fine. That's part of normal eating. But the sadness and the loneliness and the stress and the anxiety, etc., are still going to be there. So instead of using foods to try and fix them, I recommend getting help, getting a therapist, finding a friend to talk to, whatever the course of action you want to take, not just relying on food to make that go away. Respecting your body. So we are all different. We all have our own set of genetics. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people have large feet, some people have small feet. These are all things that we're born with and genetically determined to be. So we need to embrace our individual selves. We need to stop trying to make our own bodies conform to what society says is beautiful at the time. And when you think of all the different bodies that have been deemed as beautiful over the ages, we can't possibly make ourselves fit into all of those expectations and standards. So respect your body, respect your curves, respect your height, respect your lack of curves, whatever the case may be, right? All bodies deserve dignity and respect. And it's really important to respect your own body and learn to be kind to yourself. Next slide, please. Number 9 is physical movement. So a lot of people feel like the only way to exercise is strap on your running shoes, put on your spandex, and go to the gym and work out until your heart rate is a certain amount, until you've burned a bunch of calories, until you're sweating and can barely stand, right? That's not what physical movement has to be. Physical movement can be taking the dog for a walk. It can be working in the garden. It can be going to the park with your kids. It can be walking around the block at lunchtime. It can be skipping. It can be dancing in your kitchen while you're making dinner. So it's noticing the feeling of moving your body. What feels good? How does it make me feel when I move my body in a way that's pleasant rather than forcing my body to move in a way that I feel like I'm supposed to, right? It's not about how many calories you burn. It's not about how many reps you do. It's about moving your body, feeling your body move in ways maybe it hasn't in a long time. Maybe you feel a muscle that you haven't felt that you maybe didn't even know was there. Maybe it feels really good to stretch, right? Maybe just lay on the ground and do some really nice, relaxing yoga poses. Physical movement is all part of intuitive eating because it brings us back to our bodies. It helps us connect with our bodies. It helps us discover what feels good when we move our bodies. And it is not about diet, changing our body, calorie burning. Lastly, honoring your health, right? So we really want our bodies to be as healthy as possible. And that's honoring our taste buds. So eating foods that taste good, not making it about foods that have a certain amount of calories or have a certain amount of protein or are lower in fat. It's eating food that tastes good, and it's paying attention to the overall satisfaction that we get, and possibly, just feeling much lighter in mind, which again can be impacted by moving our bodies in a way that's kind to ourselves, not following rules that are dictated to us by the diet industry. It's about eating consistently over time. So like fueling ourselves rather than depriving ourselves. It's getting the sense of feeling in a more stable mood, feeling less stress, sleeping better, and all of that coming from just eating and feeding ourselves and honoring our hunger. And remembering that this is a journey, we want to make progress. Things don't happen overnight. I mean, sometimes I wish they did, but they won't. And that we're really just trying to move forward, and we don't have to be perfect. That strive for perfection, it doesn't help anybody. We just want to progress, and we know that some days, like learning that new language or like learning that new instrument, some days we have great days and everything seems to come a little bit easier, and some days are just a lot harder. So knowing that we don't need perfection, being kind to ourselves, practicing these different principles, being curious, are ways that we're going to eventually be able to embrace the principles of intuitive eating and reject that diet mentality rather than just let it rule our lives. So hopefully you found this helpful. I am going to wrap my speaking up and encourage anybody else to ask any questions. Do we have any questions, any thoughts? Does anyone want to try intuitive eating? And if you just want to think about it, that's okay too. I appreciate you showing up. All right, so if there's nothing else, then thank you so much for coming. And I'll see you in 2 weeks with our next topic.
Hey, Diana.
Bye. Hi, Dr. Moore.
How are you?
Good, how are you? So
I miss you a lot.
We're being recorded. I think we're being recorded.
Darn, don't record.